The Perth property market has been our best performing capital city property market for the last 2 years, but we are now starting to see some dubious headlines. For example, apparently Western Australia is now the only state where supply isn't below demand. Western Australia has now the second highest rate of mortgage arrears in the country, behind only the Northern Territory. And now there are over 20 suburbs in Perth where property prices are cheaper now than they were 12 months ago. So is the Perth housing boom coming to an end? Well, it's time to separate the facts from fiction. Let's dive in. Hello, it's Nero here, and if you're new to my channel, hit that subscribe button because I talk about all things related to the Australian property market and the Australian economy. It's no secret that the median house price in Australia has continued to rise in the face of increasing interest rates. But in Perth, property prices have gone ballistic, and the primary reason for that is because there haven't been enough properties there for the number of people who want to live in Perth. But what about these headlines talking about how supply is now rising to meet the demand? Well, let's have a look at some data. What you can see here is Western Australian dwelling completions versus population change. You can see the blue line is talking about completions. It hit a peak in sort of 2015, 2016, and then dropped through the floor. And now here we are in the early part of 2024. And yes, the blue line is ticking upwards. WA dwelling completions are increasing. But look at the gap compared to the red line, which is population growth. You can see that population growth is so far ahead of dwelling completions that they will never catch up. There is still a massive property shortage in Western Australia and especially in Perth. So when you see headlines talking about how WA now has enough supply to meet demand, when you look at how they try to work that out, they're basing it on averages. But the increase compared to the average has nothing to do with future price growth. We are only interested in supply versus demand. Is supply increasing? Okay. Then is supply increasing to meet demand? And this chart here clearly shows that is not the case in Western Australia. But what about mortgage arrears? Is the fixed rate mortgage cliff finally hitting Western Australia? Well, again, you don't look at the actual figures, you need to look at the trends. Compared to this time last year, arrears have increased most in New South Wales and in Victoria, but WA is the only state where arrears rates have improved, which S&P attributed to its stronger economic growth and higher property price gains. So although yes, WA has the second highest rate of mortgage arrears in the country, it's actually falling while arrears rates in other parts of the country are increasing. So clearly then you are not going to have a situation where we're going to have a massive number of people selling properties in Perth, causing the market to crash. But if property prices on average have increased over 20% in the last 12 months in Perth, can property prices continue to rise? Well, we need to look at a few other factors. Number one, affordability. And that comes down to average income versus average property price. And when we look at the latest data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, the ABS, when they look at average salary earnings, the state that has the highest income isn't New South Wales or Victoria, it's actually Western Australia. Then you've got New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland, roughly on par with each other. So WA has the highest earnings, but when it comes to property prices, the median house price in Perth is $753,947. Compare that to, say, Brisbane at $920,000, Melbourne at $940,000, or Sydney at a whopping $1.4 million plus. So what that shows you is based on income versus property price. Property prices in Perth are still very, very affordable. So just because they've risen so steeply in the last couple of years is no reason to think that property prices can't keep rising, because they're still so affordable relative to many of our other capital city. We also know that the WA population is increasing quite steeply, driven primarily by overseas migration, plus a little bit of interstate migration as well. This means that demand for property will continue to remain high, and the recent uptick in building approvals in WA is nowhere near enough to meet that demand. Plus, property listings, so the number of properties available for sale in Perth, is down 24.9% from this time last year. And we know the Western Australian economy is very, very healthy. Here's what we found out at their latest budget announcement. The 2024-25 budget reflects Western Australia's strong economy, rapidly growing population, and record employment. The state's budget continues to be in a strong position. A $3.2 billion operating surplus is expected in 2023 to 2024, with a $2.6 billion surplus forecast for 2024 and 2025. These surpluses are the highest in the country, so WA has plenty of money to invest in infrastructure and in jobs. And we see further evidence of that here. Data released by the Australian Bureau of Statistics today shows that Western Australia's economy continues to go from strength to strength, with monthly employment growing by 1.7% or 26,319 jobs in February, the best result of the states and the strongest growth in employment in almost 3 years. And in terms of the shortfall for housing in Western Australia, what you can see from this data is based on demand, so the number of properties that are needed versus supply, new houses being built, there's a shortfall of over 50%. That means that literally for every 2 families looking for a house in Western Australia, one of them misses out. So with the massive demand over supply, strong affordability, it's no wonder then that NAB expects property prices in Perth to rise by 25% by the end of 2025, and major research house Oxford Economics expects property prices to rise by 30%. But you can't buy blindly. Not everywhere will property prices rise. As you can see here, there are multiple areas that are struggling right now. There are multiple areas in Perth where property prices are cheaper than they were 12 months ago. But that's the case in almost every capital city. I can almost find any capital city where the median price of that city has risen, but there are pockets of that same capital city where property prices have fallen. That's why you can't just say, is Perth a good market to buy in? I'm going to buy in Perth. You need to know the areas to buy. You need to do your due diligence. And if you want help with that, check out the link in the description below to get totally for free the audio version and digital version of my book. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.